Time to rock. Good evening and good morning and good afternoon to all the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, the atheists, the agnostics, the Hindus, the Buddhists, and yes, even you Yazidis who are watching from all around the world. I am your friendly neighborhood philosopher, and with me right now, finally, at last, is ex-Muslim extraordinaire Abdullah Samir. How are you doing, Abdullah?
I'm good. How's it going?
Good. Now, Abdullah, we want to go through basically your story. Always interested in sort of life-changing experiences that people go through and their thought processes and things like that. But we do have to address the elephant in the room. And so before we get going, let me go ahead and ask, how much were you paid by Jews to leave Islam?
Oh, if only that was the case. It's funny how that always comes up, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if so many adherents from the religion of facts and logic are bringing up this objection, there must be something to it. So I'll go ahead and make it simple. To be fair, your secret is safe with us, but if it's more than $25,000, don't say anything. If it's less than $25,000, say anything.
Don't say anything?
Aha! We have our answer. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have it. You have the confirmation from Abdullah Samir himself. All right. Thanks, Abdullah.
Yep.
And as people join us now, we can probably get started. So probably go, I guess, chronologically here. And this would go, I guess, back to your childhood, family. What sort of family did you come from?
Yeah, so I was actually born into a pretty liberal Muslim family. My dad belongs to a sect of Islam known as Ismailism, which is so different from mainstream Orthodox Sunni and even Shia Islam that most people, many Muslims don't even consider them Muslims. Like, they don't pray 5 times a day, they don't have Hajj, they don't have Zakat, they don't have, the women don't wear hijab. So it's a very liberal, very easygoing religion. They don't pray 5 times a day, they pray 3 times a day, and they have a different type of mosque that they call Jamaat Khana. So I grew up in this very liberal family. My mom was Sunni Muslim, but she wasn't really practicing. And lo and behold, somehow in Canada, in about the 9th grade, I had some Sunni friends reach out to me, and they told me to start reading the Quran. And when I read the Quran, I converted to Sunni Islam. So I actually converted to Islam, and I became a religious Muslim. I started growing my beard. I stayed away from all the girls. So none of that. And I was, on Fridays, I was going to the mosque, and I was avoiding anything haram in my life, including music. Eventually, I got married while I was in university because I didn't want to do the dating thing. And so my life went straight down, and I deep dived all the way into Islam. And that's basically what happened. And people are sometimes surprised because usually you tend to just follow what your parents followed. But in my case, I was like a convert. I converted to Islam. And how did that happen? Well, I think because I kind of had an Islamic background already. I believed in prophets. I believed in Muhammad. But I just didn't have all of the details the way that are in the Quran. So when I read the Quran, I realized, or I felt that what I was following before was kind of like a perversion of the true religion, and so I converted to mainstream Islam.
And so I guess for Christians who are watching, this would be, I guess, similar to Christians who kind of have, pretty secularized parents who just go to church on Easter and Christmas, and then the child has a born again experience at some point. So this is you say 9th grade when you would say you were converted to.
Well, it started along there, and so as I read the Quran, I felt that there was a discrepancy between what the Quran was teaching and what I was following. So, which is why I studied, and I had exposure to Sunni Islam from my mom's side of the family. So basically I converted to Sunni Islam. I started praying 5 times a day. My younger brother also converted. He followed me in my footsteps, and we actually, like, both of us became very committed Muslims. Like I said, I avoided working in the banking industry, which is haram because interest is forbidden. I would obviously eat only halal meat, and obviously I wouldn't drink, wouldn't smoke, and yeah, Islam was very important to me. So much so that I involved myself in conferences. So they had different Islamic conferences. We had a dawah booth that I used to go to on the weekends. And I founded a couple of big Islamic websites. One of them was called lightuponlight.com. And I left that website up there so people can actually see. Because when I first came out and I said I left Islam, a lot of people said that you're a Jewish spy, Jewish conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. And
I was right.
yeah, like it actually happened to me, and which is why, I mean, it's as ridiculous as it sounds. One of the first things I said in my coming out video was, a lot of people are saying I'm a Jewish guy or whatever, right? I even his accent is Israeli. I had people tell me. It's like, have you ever heard an Israeli accent? I don't have an Israeli accent whatsoever.
Oh yeah, there's a question here about, so you grew up in Canada, but they're asking a little more about your family background. So Jacob Matthew said he's guessing Pakistan or India.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is I was born in Kenya. My parents are born in Kenya. My grandparents are also born in Kenya, but then it goes back to India. Mm-hmm. So like few generations back, you could say Indian ancestry.
So do you know why they headed to Kenya? Was it?
Well, it was so long ago, so I actually don't know.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I guess there was some sort of maybe economic reasons why they migrated. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
And
interesting.
then we obviously came to Canada because Kenya is not the best place to live. So there's a lot of corruption and bribery, and so we actually moved to Canada. And Canada, I think it was a great decision coming to Canada.
Yeah, when you mentioned lightuponlight.com, so I went ahead and clicked on your website, and I see all of these. It looks like there were links to lectures or something like that. But
Yeah.
then a notice pops up. When I clicked on it, it said, "Dear brothers and sisters, after running this site for many years, I have left Islam. Would you like to read more?" That's
Yeah, and so that was one big website I built, and I don't know, I think it had like over 1 million downloads or something. I can't even remember now. And then I stopped maintaining it because YouTube became popular and people were making YouTube Islam or whatever other websites. The next big website I built from scratch was called versebyversequran.com. So basically, it was a website that I built because I wanted there to be more Quran websites out there, and I wanted to build a Quran website myself. So I actually worked with a guy in Egypt, and I paid him money to split the Quran into each individual, like, verse and chapter would be one audio file. And through the years, we had more than 15 recitations. It was used on Quran.com. It was used on Tanzil. It was used on major Quran websites, including the King Fahad Quran Complex used my work. Like, I think in Ramadan, there was more than 2,000 downloads a second happening. It was a very, very, like, busy, popular website. Mm-hmm. So
now,
those are I did those things because I believed with all my heart that Islam was true, and I wanted other people to be Muslim as well. I didn't want them to go to hell. So I'm like, I'm going to help everyone to become Muslim. I'm going to build these websites. I'm going to use my skills, which was like computer skills, to do what I can, right, to spread the da'wah.
Now, I have to fast forward for a second because otherwise I might forget. But you mentioned that you had a brother who went along with you and became Orthodox Muslim. Whatever happened with him? Is he still Orthodox Muslim, or did he?
Yeah, he doesn't want to talk to me about Islam. He said, kind of like, I just don't want to discuss it with you. The funny thing is, at that time, he was open to like dialogue, and I convinced him. But now he's so into the whole Islam thing, and his wife is Muslim as well, and the entire extended family is Muslim. He doesn't want to even think about it. Now, whereas in my case, like I told you, my wife comes from a Christian background, and so there's no harm in me leaving Islam. Her side of the family is cool with me being a non-Muslim, right? They're probably happier that I'm an atheist than I'm a Muslim, right? Coming from a Christian background. So they're actually very happy I left Islam because now we're living a normal life. My kids can go out for, they don't have to eat halal food. I don't force them to not listen to music, and they can have like a more relatively simple life without all these restrictions, praying 5 times a day and all that, right?
Interesting comment here. from a Muslim. She says, Islam doesn't need him. If he left or not, who cares? Whatever makes him happy. Well, Zahra, I'm very happy that you are much more tolerant than your God, right? And your prophet and all of your prophet's companions, because they would want to chop his head off, right? And your attitude is, hey, whatever makes you happy, that's fine. Well, that's great, but it certainly matters because certain areas of the world, Islam is growing rapidly. As Islam grows, it tends to become more extreme, and as it becomes more extreme, people like Abdullah here need to be wondering at some point, hey, what if anyone ever decides to really obey Muhammad's command to chop the head off people who leave Islam, especially since you're not just under one death sentence, you're under multiple death sentences, right? Because you also criticize Islam.
Yeah, we could talk about that a bit if you like. Like when I first left Islam, I got a whole.
Hang on. Let's go ahead and back up and fill in the gap. Yeah, I keep throwing it off I keep throwing it off accidentally by fast forwarding.
Those damn questioners.
Yeah. So, college. So you go to college and you get married. So from basically ninth grade on through college, and you and I were talking before we went live that seems to be the window for when people change their views, right? That sort of between ninth and 10th grade and the college years is usually when someone changes from like atheist to Christian or Christian to atheist or Islam to something else or something to Islam, seems to be in that window, because it's always seemed to me that before that you just have an overwhelming tendency to believe what your parents believe. When you're when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, you believe what dad says. And if someone else challenges you, you say, well, it's not what my dad says. Yeah. Whereas, you start hitting 15, 16, then you're in that window where, if now you're starting to think for yourself, you're being exposed to a lot of different things. And so you have that opportunity. But if you go kind of farther than that, like if you go past college, well, then people are sort of set in their ways and they have careers and now they're thinking about other things and they just don't have changing your worldview when you're 40 or 50 years old is kind of,
it's much harder.
Yeah. Because now you have to be thinking not just about, hey, what my parents are think, but hey, what are my kids going to think? What is everyone going to think? Yeah. So when did that? I guess we should. So I guess we should ask. Yeah.
I was 18, and it was 18 when I converted to Islam, around 18, and I left Islam just 4 years ago. So obviously I'm long done with university. I have kids. My oldest is 11, at the time was around 11. In 2015, I left Islam. And what actually happened was I was starting to have like small little tiny doubts. But in Ramadan, I was at the mosque and one of the imams was talking about something. Oh yeah, actually before that, sorry, step back 1 year. I always forget this part of the story. I was discussing with online, this was in 2014, so a year before I actually officially left Islam. There was a guy who told me he was Christian, and he said, I almost converted to Islam, but then I found out that a lot of the stories in the Quran are coming from Jewish myths, Jewish mythology, the Talmud, right? And I'm like, ha, 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 don't worry, I will solve your problems, let's talk. So then I started to discuss with him, and he said, no, look into it. It's because I'm like, no, but these stories actually come from God, not from Jewish rabbis or whatever, right? And he was like, no, look into it. And I looked into it, and I started to have trouble because I found out that a lot of the stories in the Quran actually came from the Talmud, which is like the Jewish fables. Like the Jewish, like they had the stories that they passed on from generation to generation, and they're not considered like revelation, right? So these stories, some of them ended up in the Quran. So I was like, oh my God, this is troubling. And then the whole Dhul Qarnayn thing, was a big problem as well because I couldn't make sense of where is this gigantic gate. But I ended up bearing my doubts and becoming staying Muslim. I left Islam for 1 day, but then I said, you know what? I talked to my wife, I talked to my friends, and we were like, you know what, Islam is good. I'm just going to be a Muslim, right? These are just small doubts, so just forget it. Just forget your doubts. 1 year later, all of my doubts came rushing back again in Ramadan. Halfway through Ramadan, I was in the mosque, and the Imam was like, And these astronauts or something, these scientists, they think they're so smart, but Allah knows better. He says the sky is held up without any pillars or something, right? And I was like, oh my God. And all of the doubts came rushing back to me. So the science, which is basically the way that the Quran describes the world, it very much seems to be the work of a 7th century man. And that's when I started to have like massive major doubts. And then I said, I told myself, I can't do this anymore. I have to find out, is it truly from God or not? And so I started to look up everything I could find out about Islam. Both, obviously, I was like, deep into Islam already, so I started to look at the arguments against Islam, kind of like for the first time. And so at that point, I finally realized that Islam was false. I ran into your content as well. So the biggest issues for me was the science, or basically the description of the universe in the Quran, about how Allah says he holds up the sky without any pillars, how he keeps up the sky from falling, how, like on and on, how the sun and the moon go in orbit, and, basically it's a geocentric model of the universe. So these were the biggest problems for me. But then I found your content as well. And I actually started to see that even Muhammad's life was not as pure as I thought it was.
You think?
And the funny thing is this wasn't my issue back then. Like that's not how I got into it. I just kind of didn't think about those things. And I just accepted it. Okay, but this is truly from God. So even if I can't make sense of him having so many wives and all that stuff, I just accepted it. But when I started to watch your videos and your content, a couple of things really rang true with me. One was, you mentioned, like, for example, how would a good husband just like throw his wife Sauda to the side and give her night to Aisha? Like that's not, a godly man would not do that. He would be true to all of his wives equally, right? Not throw her to the side because she's fat or old or whatever. That rang true to me. The whole thing you said about how the dinner guests, Muhammad's dinner guests, and like this doesn't make sense. And, the whole issue with Zainab, I can't remember if you explored that or not. But then another big thing, which I actually have to thank you for, is the whole thing about how in Christianity, the story of Jesus makes a lot more sense. It's more coherent. In the theology of Christianity, God's only son. Whereas in Islam, it's just like out of all the prophets, for no apparent reason, Jesus is like, has a virgin birth. Now, again, I'm atheist, so I don't believe that Jesus did have a virgin birth. I don't believe any of that stuff.
Yeah, but you can recognize something that fits together better than something else. Yeah,
exactly. To me, it made a lot of sense that this fits the story more than in Islam. It doesn't. To me, it didn't fit, right? And you pointed that out. Another thing that didn't make sense, that's related to Christianity again, is the whole thing about the 4 Gospels versus in the Quran, Isa has the Injil, the Gospel, and again, it didn't make sense to me that when I started to study Christianity for real, not like Zakir Naik and Ahmed Didat, but like actual studying Christianity, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Muhammad seemed to get it all wrong. There was no gospel. There was 4 Gospels, which are not sent to Jesus, but they were written about Jesus, inspired word of God, as you would say. But again, this seems like a big mistake to me. And to me, it did seem like a mistake at the time. So I actually have an article I wrote where, 6 points that 6 reasons where I believe that Muhammad copied, Christianity, Jesus from Christianity, or took it from Christianity. And, the whole thing about the infancy gospel being available in Syriac in the place and time close to Muhammad, and, the clay bird story, and all of these things, they fit the narrative very well that Muhammad was taking what he could find, right? And so, I mean, for that reason, I do have to say thank you. And we were actually planning, I contacted you when I left Islam many years ago, and we were like, let's have a conversation, and it just didn't happen. So, a couple of years later,
it's happening now, yeah. No, it's a good time now. I want to back up just because I'm sure there are people. I know there are people who have watched a lot of my videos, so they're going to know exactly what you're talking about on some of these issues. But there are other people who might be very new to this. So if we could back up a little bit and be sort of clear on some of these points you're raising here. Guys, I think the overarching position that Abdullah was bringing up is, if you believe that the Quran is what it claims to be, namely this eternal word of God with no human input at all, just handed over to human beings, that's going to lead to certain expectations. But if it's actually, something put out by a 7th century Arab caravan trader living in a certain context, well, you're going to expect certain other things. And so which one of these two hypotheses is confirmed by the evidence? And you mentioned, the first thing you mentioned was that a lot of the stories in the Quran seem to come from Jewish sources, but not the Torah, or even anywhere in the Old Testament, but from sources like the Talmud. And for those of you who want to look into those, I don't know if you wanted to mention anything specific, but even like some very popular passages, like some of the teachings, one of the top 2 or 3 favorite verses for Muslims to quote in the West is that if anyone has killed a man, it's as if he's killed all mankind. That's Surah 5, verse 32. That's a perfect example in that the Quran doesn't say that this is this is a revelation from this Quran. This is a revelation that came from the Quran. It says that this was given to the children of Israel. And when you ask the children of Israel, hey, children of Israel, where's that? It's in the Talmud. And what's interesting is that was a rabbi's commentary. That was a rabbi's commentary, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Which is absolutely amazing that the Quran is saying, yes, this rabbi's commentary on this story of Cain and Abel. Guys, just give everyone the background. You have Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and so God comes up and asks Cain, hey, what happened, and so on. And but God says, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And a Jewish commentator, rabbi, commented saying, hey, when it says your brother's blood, it's not actually blood, it's bloods. So what this passage is saying to us is that basically the blood of all his future descendants was crying out. So it was the bloods of all your future descendants. By killing Abel, Cain was killing all future generations. And so he concludes, so what this is telling us is that if you kill a man, it's as if you've killed all mankind, right? You're killing all future generations of mankind by killing this person. And Muhammad hears this and thinks, wow, that's some good stuff there. He hears Jews saying it, but that's the thing, right? If Allah says that the Torah is the revelation of God, or that the Psalms are revelation of God, that's one thing. But I would expect Allah to know the difference between the Torah and some guy's commentary much later on in Mishnah Sanhedrin. I would expect God to know that, but I wouldn't expect Muhammad to know that, right? If he hears a Jew quoting the story about Cain and Abel, and then also hears a Jew giving this quotation, if anyone kills a man, it's as if he's killed all mankind, I wouldn't expect Muhammad to know the difference. And we find that the author of the Quran doesn't know the difference. So does that fit better with it being from God or with it being from Muhammad? And it seems like a lot of the points you brought up fall into that sort of reasoning. Hey, if this is from God, well, this doesn't make sense. If it's from Muhammad, well, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so on with you're talking about the sort of heretical Christian sources where we find a lot of these stories, the scientific issues. So so that's the
and the interesting thing is I've actually reconsidered when I first left Islam, and I think a lot of Muslims go through this kind of process. You're looking for mistakes in the Quran, but later on you realize that it's not even about mistakes in the Quran. It's like, why should I believe in it in the first place? Yeah. Let's go back. You prove it to me. Yeah. I don't need to disprove it. So a lot of times when people say, well, prove to me the Quran's not from God, I'm like, well, hold on a second. Prove to me it is from God. And then if you want, we can get to some of the mistakes. But the burden of proof is on you to show that it's from God, not on me to say it's not from God.
No, that's actually that's a very important point, right? Because if there were some great evidence for the Quran, then maybe we would overlook some of these other things, right? So in other words, if there was some amazing evidence that Muhammad's a prophet and he actually brought revelation from God, then if we read in the Quran that, that God revealed to the children of Israel, if anyone kills a man, it's as if he's killed all mankind. And we know where this comes from. Maybe we say, okay, well, maybe this guy heard it from somewhere else that was revelation. Maybe he got it. Maybe we look past that. But if we never have the good reasons to begin with, then all we see are problems, right? All we see, okay, here are 1,001 problems, but no good reason to actually believe it.
I mean, you just need one mistake in reality, because the Quran itself says, and I used to go around telling people this, non-Muslims, the Quran says if you can find one single error, if it's not from God, so try to find a mistake. I used to challenge people like that, and eventually it caught up with me because I was sincere. Like, I was looking for the truth, so eventually I figured it out, right?
Yeah. So you started having these doubts.
Yeah, so I started having doubts and stuff, and I was very public with it. So I'm kind of like well loved in the community because I'm a convert. Even though I converted from one sect of Islam to the other, everybody loved me because they saw me as this guy that accepted their religion wholeheartedly, didn't grow up in it, and wanted to be a believer, right? And so I was well loved in the community. I had a lot of friends, and when I started to post on Facebook that I was having these issues, people were like, "Oh no." One guy said, he sent me a message. He's like, "Are you doing like a social experiment? Is this some sort of trick or something?" I said, no. I'm actually finding these issues. And he's like, no. You can't post about this stuff or you shouldn't post about this stuff on Facebook. You need to go talk to an imam, a sheikh, a Maulvi, right? And I'm like, okay, like, who can I talk to, right? And then, so but I did say, no, but I have a right to post these things. Like, this is my Facebook, right? And I want to have these discussions with people. And he's like, you're going to misguide people. I'm like, yeah, but if it's the truth, then like people need to know, right? And if it's not true, then I need to know as well. So then some people got upset at me, but my friends didn't really do much about it. But they did call me on the phone. So I talked to a guy that, teaches Islamic studies in a university in the U.S., who was a friend of mine from university. I talked to another guy who studied in Egypt, Arabic, and he came back and we had a long conversation. I talked to a sheikh who teaches, he studied in Saudi and he teaches all over the world. I talked to a bunch of people. But what I found was there wasn't any compelling answers to my questions, to the doubts I had, to the holes in the Quran. There was no real solution to these problems. And so, but then there was one guy who was a friend of mine around the same age who told me I almost left Islam, but I ended up staying as a Muslim. And let's talk. And I'm like, yes, this is amazing. So I deleted all my Facebook posts and I went to meet him. And I went to his house and we talked for like 5 hours. And I'm like, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? I asked him all the questions. But this was very early on, keep in mind. So now, obviously, like, I actually have even more problems with Islam than I did before. But this was just early on. Like, I hadn't even looked into like evolution or anything like that. And so when I asked him some of these points, some of them he's like, this is like a leap of faith we can take. Some of them he's like, well, I have this sort of explanation about this. And some of them he said, at the end of the day, what he told me was, I don't want to be wrong. Basically, Pascal's wager. And so I'm just going to accept it. And I said, okay, what if I have some more questions? Can I talk to you? He's like, no, I don't want to talk about it anymore after this. I'm done. I don't want to think about this anymore. But then at that point, like, there was nobody else that could actually help me because everyone I talked to, I even went to another mosque, a Sufi mosque this time, and I talked to that imam too, and he kind of got mad at me for asking questions, but he didn't have answers either. Like, nobody had solutions to these things. So then I started blogging, and I created a blog, abdullahsamir.com, and I started to document all of these issues because I kept having the same conversation over and over and over again. And so I started blogging, and then eventually I decided to make a video because, again, even when you write stuff, people don't know if you're like a real person who is a Jewish conspiracy. So then I made a video. And then when I made the first video, it went viral. It had like 100,000 views or something. And then I think that's when I finally ran into you. And then it started to get the death threats. So the thing is, I got a lot of death threats early on in the beginning. And I feel now what I think is that, like, online death threats are so cheap. And by the way, one more thing I have to thank you for. I saw the videos where you're like, I challenge a jihadi, and you went out and you're like, okay, let's meet at this time, this place, right? And never showed up, right?
No, he had said, if I will meet him in Manhattan, then he will kill me. And so, so I said, okay, here's the time and the place. And he said, no, he said 6 o'clock or something like that. And I said, no, my kid's got MMA during that time. So pick a different, how about noon? And he said, okay. And yeah, I went down. That actually happened several times. That time I videotaped it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that was inspiring to me because I'm like, wow, this guy's brave, and if you can do it, I can do it. And other ex-Muslims that came out before me, Imtiaz Shams and Hassan Radwan, and other people that were public and they were okay. So I'm like, you know what? I think I can do this too. So I came out, and I got a lot of death threats, right? And like I was saying, I feel like death threats from anonymous profiles, and especially from people in Pakistan, a lot of them were Pakistani. They're just so cheap because there's no, it doesn't cost you anything, and there's no risk to you. A real death threat in real life would be more serious and more significant. But I got a lot of them, and then they kind of tapered down, and I didn't get any for a long time. And I still get them from time to time. Maybe I don't look at them. I just ignore them because they're kind of annoying. But I did get something else happen to me, which is, well, first of all, I cannot travel to any Muslim country. I would not dare. I would never ever go to any Muslim country. I would never go to a Saudi embassy. I mean, that's stupid.
Yeah, that would be very, very dumb.
Yeah. And but one thing did happen to me, which is I was harassed at my office in a sense. What happened was I found out after the fact, I'm in IT, so I don't do this for a living. I actually do this just to help people. But my full-time job, I have a full-time job and I have kids. Like I told you, I have 5 kids. I have a wife, right?
Little side note. Would you like to do this full-time? If you could do anything in the world, would you be doing this, or do you like doing tech stuff?
I think I like the freedom of being a YouTuber.
Yeah.
I
love being a YouTuber, right?
Yeah,
I love
the
it. It's my favorite thing in the world.
9 to 5 is annoying, right? You know what I mean? I get up every day, you have to go to work. You don't have the same the same level of creativity you can put into it, compared to writing, blogging, YouTubing, all that stuff. So I wouldn't mind, but I don't know if it'll ever get to that. If it does, we'll see. But for now, I'm not making money from this is not my focus by any means. For now, I really want to just do this to help people, and if a little bit of money comes out of it, well and good. But it'll be a while, I think, if it becomes, for me to make it full time. I think it would be too much. It'd be too much of a burden right now because I have young kids and I need to spend time with the family. So I do it when I can. I squeeze in a little time here and there, right?
Well, I just want to say, for people who do want to support you support your work on YouTube, I got the link to your Patreon there in the description box. So if any of you want to chip in to Abdullah so he can focus more and more on these things as time goes on, that link is there.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you. So what happened was, just to finish off the story, was I found out from my boss. Actually, I found out from somebody else that people were calling my company and telling them, you should fire this guy.
Wow.
They figured out where I worked. First of all. So someone I know, or somehow from what I had online, even though I didn't have the exact details online, but I had some details. They figured it out, and then they called up the company, multiple people, and they said I need to get fired because I'm against Islam and I'm a bigot. I don't know exactly what they said, but I'm a bad representative of the company, and I shouldn't be employed because I'm going to make them look bad, and I'm a bad person, and you should fire him. So they wanted to fire me. No, they didn't want to fire me, but they had a conversation about me, human resources. I think even the president got involved. And thankfully, they decided that what I do online is my own business.
That's cool.
And you know what? It doesn't affect my work. I'm not going around saying, hey, I'm so-and-so person on behalf of this company saying these things. This is my personal life, right? And so my personal life shouldn't affect. And plus, I'm a good employee. They loved me. I'm doing excellent work. I even got a promotion after that. So
oh, nice.
I guess that's part of it as well, right? You do good work and people will like you, right?
No, it's interesting what you're bringing up, because basically everything you say about your experience, I'm either having flashbacks of my own experiences or people who I know. Because when you mentioned that, it had to be someone you knew who went and told told the company. Nabil had left Islam for about a month when he got his first death threat, and it was attached to his car, and he was not public.
What?
Yeah, he was not public. He was not online. So this means that it was someone he knew, right? It was one of the few Muslims that he knew that he had mentioned this to, who and so there's that. And then going along with the death threats, I've also noticed that I still get death threats, but not nearly as many as I did several years ago. And it almost seems like it almost seems like there are Muslims in different places in the world who aren't going to do anything, but it seems like they're kind of feeling you out, right, to see what they can do to get to you, right?
Yeah.
Hey, if we threaten his life, is that going to stop him? If we insult him and heap abuse on him, is that going to stop him? If we start talking about his family, his kids, is that going to stop him? What's it going to take? If we have to harass him at work, is that going to stop him? And they kind of feel it out. And so, as you mentioned, who cares about the vast majority of them? The only two kinds of death threats that I ever even remotely take seriously, they're kind of two extremes. Okay. On one end are like the rambling, insane, death threats, because there I start to feel like I'm dealing with a mentally unstable person who might want to
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it'll be die Jew, kill, die, kill, stupid Jew, blah, blah. And it'll just be this rambling, incoherent thing in all caps, everything misspelled. I'm like, this sounds like a legitimately mentally ill person here who might do something if I'm ever in the right place. But at the other extreme, the ones that I tend to take care of. One guy, one Muslim, he sent me it had to be like 6 or 7 pages, completely well written, beautiful prose, clearly very well educated, quoting all of his statements in English and Arabic, and saying, this is why I have to die. This is the Islamic justification for why he has to come and kill me. And so there I'm like, okay, this guy's putting a lot of thought into this. He's not just typing out a quick little comment, hey, I'm going to kill you or something like that.
The psychopaths do worry me as well, because one of the guys that threatened me was like a stalker type dude. I'm not going to say who he is, but he was a stalker type dude. He had I Googled him, and he had previous warrants for his arrest for physical violence.
Oh yeah.
And this guy was literally stalking me. He didn't and he was one of the guys who threatened me. So
you got to watch out for those psychopaths.
Yeah, unfortunately, the more kind of popular you get, the more of these psychopaths you run into, right? And you know this more than me.
I know all about psychopaths.
The more people you run into, the more likely you have these crazy people after you, right? That's the unfortunate thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, how old were you when you, I guess, finally, you're no longer a Muslim?
Yeah, I was in my 30s, so I was.
Whoa!
That
is like senior citizen as far as massive worldview change.
Yeah, I was 32, and it just like I said, I just truly believed in it, and when I found that it wasn't, I couldn't add, 1 and 1 wasn't equaling, 1 and 1 was equaling 5. I had to throw it out and say, no, hold on, I need to make some adjustments to what I believe.
So what was you mentioned that you had an 11-year-old son, but that your wife was from more of a Christian background. So what were things like for your kids?
So actually, my wife also had become Muslim before she met me. So we were both Muslim. So she does come from a Christian background, a Pentecost background, half Pentecost, half Catholic, her parents, I mean. But she had converted to Islam, and she was a full hijab wearing woman. And so we were a very religious family. And so when I left Islam, I was a little bit nervous in the beginning. I was quite nervous because Islam says a Muslim woman cannot be married to a non-Muslim man. A Muslim man can have a Jewish or Christian wife, but not the other way around. And I was a disbeliever, right? I was considered kafir, right?
Yeah, repeat that for everyone. So, guys, just so everyone understands. In Islam, a Muslim man can marry a Jewish or Christian woman. But a Muslim woman cannot be married to a Jewish or Christian
non-Muslim
man. Yeah. And so, according to Islam, if your husband suddenly becomes an unbeliever, that's supposed to end the marriage right there. So how did this play out?
So some people say, some scholars would say you have 30 days or something to bring him back to Islam or whatever. But the reality is that she would technically have to leave me, right? Because if she stayed as a Muslim. And so I was a little bit nervous. How would she take it? So thankfully, I gave her a little bit of information at a time, and she didn't end up leaving Islam per se, but she didn't end up leaving me either. So thankfully, we have 5 kids, and we managed to keep the family together. Yeah. And she was able to say, okay, even though I still believe in this stuff, to some extent, I'm not going to leave you over this because that would be like a disaster for the family, and it doesn't make any sense, right? So she stayed with me. And of course, some of the Muslim friends were kind of annoyed with her and said, yo, you should have left him because of the kids, which makes no sense because I still would have been in their lives, which is so ridiculous that they were saying that. But they wanted us to break up, right? Many, many people in the Muslim community wanted us to break up because and many people were against me because they saw me as some sort of evil influence in her life. I was going to like deconvert her or something, right? And so they were like, he's going to misguide her, this nasty guy, whatever, this apostate, blah, blah, blah. But thankfully, we ended up staying together. My kids, like we were discussing just before the call, I'm so glad that they're young enough that they're not like totally indoctrinated into Islam, and they were able to like see things like from like a neutral perspective. Like they're young enough, right? So my son, he's now 14, and he is growing up, and he's going to decide for himself what he wants to be, whether he wants to be Muslim or not. But I have a strong feeling that none of my kids are going to be believers, because when you see your parents, at least your father, leave Islam like that, like how could you believe in it anymore? Because it's a groundbreaking, it's a ground shaking thing that a guy goes from like praying 5 times a day and doing everything in Islam to just completely leaving it. So I have a feeling that they will not end up being Muslim, and they will have to decide for themselves if they want to believe in God or not believe in God. We want to teach them that to be rational and to look into things for themselves and make their own decisions and make their own conclusions, and how to come up with these conclusions. I want to teach them all of these things as well.
And so with the I agree with the kids. It would be very strange for them to become Muslims. Normally, when I hear of someone converting to Islam, it's based on misinformation. And I mean, like, it's got to be like 95, 96% of the time when, because I'm interested when someone says, hey, I grew up in church or something like that, and I became a Muslim in college or something like that. I'm usually like, well, what was the reasoning? And it's usually based on just total nonsense. The person clearly didn't read anything remotely resembling a Muslim source. They believed, their Muslim friends, what they were telling them without actually doing the research and so on. So, but that, that's not going to happen if your dad is, you, basically, right? You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
So, yeah. All right. So now, at that point, because this is always interesting, right? Because when you leave Islam, you got a couple different routes you can go, right? You can just go on living your life, right? Living your life. You had a job. You got a job that you like. You can do that and lay low and be quiet and aren't going to have many problems. Even though Muslims in the area or Muslims that you used to know, they'll know who you are, and they might want to bother you or something like that. Worst case scenario, you can always move somewhere else, and then you never have to worry about it again. No one's ever going to know anything. But you decided to be vocal about it. So now you already mentioned earlier that you wanted to help people, but I mean, was that ever? Did you ever really have to think through that? Because, it's not just you. It's, you've got a wife and kids. And if you've got enough people who say, hey, we want to chop your head off, then it has to be a concern.
So the interesting thing is that, so the Muslim community that knows me, like they all, like to different extents, they know where I live and stuff like that. They didn't attack me in any sense. Most of them actually ended up just being sad for me. They wanted to invite me to conferences. A bunch of them, like I told you, they wanted to meet me. And I got tired of meeting people, and I got really irritated too, because one day I met a guy in Starbucks, and he's a friend of mine from university, engineering student, and we were talking about Gog and Magog, and he's like, yeah, they're inside the earth. It's a hollow earth, man. And I'm like, dude, give me a break. Hollow Earth, come on. And it was like such nonsense he was spewing at me. And I'm like, just like, okay, anyone
you
wants
can go there, man. You just go to the Grand Canyon. You go to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. There's a big hole there. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let's anyone that wants to meet me now, you read my blog first, you come up with specific points where you disagree with me, and then we can meet or call. Because it's like, you can talk about this all day and they'll still be like, no. Like, because they haven't even looked into what you're saying, right? And that frustrates me, because the reason I made the blog is so I don't have to repeat myself over and over again, right? But yeah, so the Muslim community themselves here in Canada, they're pretty tolerant. They're pretty okay with me. But like I said, the worst that happened was some people called and tried to get me fired, which is not acceptable. It's bullying, right? It's like real life bullying.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened was one of my friends was like, who knew me for like 10 plus years. And he used to do the Dawa boots with me. And he's like, I'm not going to help you move because you're making a blog. I was like, but you know, like I still got a family here, right? Like, why you don't want to help them too? And he was like, oh, but you're against Islam and you're making a blog. And if you didn't make a blog, I would have helped you. Whatever. I got movers anyways. But like, it was kind of like a disappointing thing. And then I had people who knew me as well go online and slander me and said I left Islam because I didn't want to pray 5 times a day. Like, what? Like, really? You freaking kidding me? Oh, I didn't like fasting. I actually didn't like fasting. But, like, that's not a reason to leave Islam. I could just skip fasting once in a while. You know what I'm saying? I can make it up. What do Muslims do? They make it up on the short months, like in December when the fast is shorter in Canada, right? So that's not a reason to leave Islam. But some people were lying against me like that. That really upset me, especially people that knew me and my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's always the case, right? I've never seen a Muslim who left Islam where he wasn't saddled with all of these other motives, right? Because from a Muslim perspective, it can't be, hey, I actually sincerely looked at the Muslim sources, at the Muslim stories, and concluded that this doesn't come from God. It can't be that, because that would be a problem with the religion. So it has to be you're getting paid by Jews or something like that. So even with Nabil, people who didn't know him would say things like, "Oh, you're getting paid. Oh, you converted because you wanted a white woman or something like this. Why was it?" And but for people who know him, people know that's all ridiculous. And so the people who know him would say he was brainwashed by me, right? Because they can't say he's doing it from some horrible motive. So they concluded that I'm like this diabolical manipulator and so on. And I'm just like, do you have any clue how smart this guy is, right? Do you have any clue how smart Nabil is? You think that I'm this psychological genius, mastermind manipulator. But notice it has to be something other than you actually finding a problem in Islam. And even going to your boss trying to get you fired, that fits into that category of what kind of pressure can we put on this person that will be enough pressure for him to realize, wait a minute, I can't keep going down this road. I can't keep doing the same thing I'm doing. And that's the same category as the death threats and everything else. It's always, we either want to control you and force you to be a Muslim again, or if we can't do that, at least control you enough to where you're not going to say anything about it. At least you're not going to criticize it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like why he said, I'm not going to help you move. And that's where it was coming from, I think, right?
Yeah. So just so you know, no one's going to help you move anymore. So you come back to Islam, then we'll all help you move. We'll all help you move as long as you come back.
Yeah, the funniest thing I was going to say, like you left Islam for a white woman. That's the funniest thing that's being used against me because like she is white, but she was still Muslim when I left Islam. So it's like you didn't even do your basic ABC research on me.
Yeah.
Like that has nothing to do
funny.
with it.
I only brought it up because that's what people actually said about Nabil.
Yeah. They said that about me too. Right? It was just really funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that whether or not you actually make money or you don't make money doing this, people will still say you're doing this for money. Like the Patreon I created like less than 3 months ago or something, like 4 months ago. Like until then, like for the last 4 years, I haven't made a single penny from this, and I didn't even care if I made a single penny. But it didn't stop people. So then I'm like, you know what? Like, it's not going to make a difference whether or not I do that. I might as well cover some of my costs. But like, people don't care. Like, they're going to insult you whether or not you do it, whether or not you make a bit of money on it. So I'm like, whatever. Might as well make a bit of money too while I'm doing this.
No, I mean, doing videos, doing YouTube, you can always, upgrade your tech, your software, cameras, mics, all that stuff. And so it does help when people are contributing.
So time consuming.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I mentioned that I'd had a lot of sort of parallel experiences, but when I actually started debating and so on, I remember this time I was invited to a church to speak, and then I showed up, and the pastor said, we got calls from 15 different Muslims saying don't let you speak because you're a bigot and hate monger and stuff like this.
Wow.
And this is before I was like,
wow,
David Wood on YouTube. Back then I just started debating and stuff like that. And so, but that's actually part of the reason why I focused on the internet. I was like, I'm getting a PhD in philosophy. All I can do with a PhD in philosophy is teach at a university. I can't teach at a university if I got people calling the university all the time and harassing me at the university. So ironically, that those complaints actually helped cause me to focus on the internet more, focus on YouTube. So I'm like, well, they can't shut me down. They can't shut me down on the internet.
Oh, that's becoming a problem too now.
Yeah, I know. That's what sucks, right? Because 10 years ago, I'm like, okay, you can shut me down pretty much anything I do. You can shut me down from speaking. You can shut me down from working. You can't shut me down on the internet. Therefore, it makes sense for me to just focus on the internet. And that's why, it's terrifying now when they start, deplatforming you.
Yep.
Have you had any experiences with that, with videos or anything being
oh my God. I've been banned from Facebook so many times for 30 days at a time. I'm on my third 30-day ban right now.
Now, were you calling for violence against Muslims or something?
No, I was basically attacked okay, so here's the thing. I'm known as the ex-Muslim that's like the most reasonable ex-Muslim. Like I try my best to be as balanced as possible in my critique of Islam. But
is that your title? You should get T-shirt, the most reasonable ex-Muslim. And you could put a scale of like reason, and you're at the top, and then the apostate prophet, he's a little bit lower, and then all these other guys are down there.
What I mean is not reasonable in the sense of like rational, but like
you're doing everything you can to be fair, right?
Yeah, like I'm being kinder to them, and I'm giving them points where they deserve points. Mm-hmm. But even then, I still got like deplatformed 3 times now. It wasn't even what I was posting. I was banned for the most stupidest thing because people were targeting. Like they went through all my old posts. They found I had this like a funny post which was after sex selfies are trending again, and it was a picture of a guy that was like laying with some girl, and there was no nudity in it. It was just a guy's chest, which is usually fine, right? Mm-hmm. And I was banned for that. I was like, 30-day ban for that? Like, there's much more nudity on Facebook than that. And I was banned for, again, the second time was again something so stupid, and I realized I can't use any sarcasm on Facebook either because it's taken the wrong way. And
well, part of the problem is if you've got people who are coming after you, they're going to basically complain about anything you do, anything you can post, even if you mean it in a completely innocent way or it doesn't violate all the policies. If everything you post, you have 50 people complaining to Facebook about, then some of that stuff is going to get you banned, even though no one would ever think twice about it if you didn't have people targeting you there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and as you know, Apostate Prophet was banned on Twitter now. So I feel like my day is coming on Twitter too. I don't know when that's going to happen, but
I feel like it might be coming everywhere. So that's the sad part.
Yeah, which is why I have a blog too. Right? Like no one. I mean, shutting down my blog would be like I have to be like literally like telling people to kill others or something, because like to get to that point you have to be like on a terrorist watch list or something, you know what I mean? But my blog is going to stay up, and that's what I'm most proud of. Like that's my effort. Obviously the YouTube took a hell of a lot of work as well. So I hope I don't lose those, but I keep backups of all my videos just in case that disappears one day as well.
That's good. I mean, just think about this, right? You've got Hollywood. Hollywood's pretty one-sided on a lot of things. You've got the education system that can be very one-sided on certain things. You've got politicians and so on. The internet has become the place where everyone can have sort of a fair say and to share your ideas and things like that. And when people say, hey, those guys over there who are quoting facts and sources and giving reasoned arguments, they have to be silenced, instead of just being refuted, right? Instead of saying, okay, well, here, we're going to show that they're actually wrong about these things. When it has to be, no, the apostate prophet said that Islam promotes violence or killing apostates or something like that. We have to shut him down. We don't examine what he says. We just have to shut him down. That's some terrifying stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, we have, now check this out. We have We have Zahra over here saying, so when can we ask this guest questions? Now we have about 1,100 people on here. I would like you to, before we, if you want to take some questions,
Sure.
we'll take some questions. And guys, if you could get them ready now, because I would like Abdullah to talk a little bit about his views right now as they stand right now, and then after that we'll get to some questions. Now, if you posted a question 5 minutes ago, I'm not going to be looking at that. I'm only going to be looking at the ones that are popping up right now. So if you had a pressing question for Abdullah, go ahead and repost that. I'll give him sort of the most recent questions. But okay. Abdullah, so you've mentioned that you are an atheist, but with atheists and agnostics, there's kind of a spectrum, right? There's kind of a spectrum, and some people have already asked you to mention sort of your views on religion. Now, you're on a Christian page right now, and there are lots of Christians over there. I just want to say, don't worry about holding back. We're not made of glass. We're not sensitive. We get blasted all the time for our views. So if you just want to give your perspective on religion in general, belief in God in general, all of these, your belief about the world, and basically anything you want to share, just so people can understand where you're at right now, and then we'll take some questions.
Okay, thanks for that. So basically, I believe. At the moment, I'm an agnostic atheist, so what that means is I don't believe in a God. I believe that the universe is eternal in some sense, but not in particular this instance of it, because obviously there was a Big Bang and there was a beginning to it, but maybe it's cyclical. I'm willing to say that I don't actually know, how all of this came about and how we got here. I do think the universe and humanity and all of nature is amazing. And as I learn more and more, I'm always blown away by it. I am okay with the idea of a God, the idea that there could be a supernatural creator of the cosmos, of the universe, but I don't believe there's enough evidence to posit that this creator spoke to humanity. So I'm not convinced that any of the holy books are actually from God, or that God actually spoke to mankind. I do believe that human beings had experiences, whether there was some sort of whether it was meditation induced or drug induced or whatever sort of experiences. And I do believe that the supernatural can be explained by materialism. So I'm a materialist, through and through, pretty much. Any clarification on that, or?
No, your position seems. It seems sort of similar to David Hume. Lots of people think that Hume was an atheist, so he's a little bit different in that he was a kind of deist. But his position at the end of the day, and people kind of miss this in the dialogues, was yes. Intelligence, yes, certainly. If we had to come down on one side, looks like intelligence. He argued against it the entire time, but people miss the point in the dialogues. He's trying to show, hey, you Christians or you theists in general are telling me to go with this evidence of design, and yet when you tell me not to be skeptical, but then when I point out all the suffering and misery in the world, you say, be skeptical about how this relates to belief in God. Don't just accept this as. So he said the true conclusion is design, yes, but not by a God that cares anything about us. So that's basically his position. So that's a kind of deism, but similar to what you're saying in the sense that some sort of force or maybe God, just not one that's interacting with us or something like that.
Yeah, but I wouldn't call myself a deist, but I'm.
No,
that's
what I said. I said different. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm definitely okay with people who do believe in God and who do consider there is a supernatural creator of the universe. One of the issues which we didn't talk about for me was the idea of hell. So the idea of hell is something that was a big problem to me, and I'd love to get into this as well when you come on my channel. I'll go through a lot.
If you want, we can have sort of talks on specific issues, right?
Okay.
It would be kind of interesting, ex-atheist Christian talks with ex-Muslim atheist on, and it could be anything, the design argument, the cosmological argument, the moral argument, miracles. We talk about any of those things and sort of just focus on one thing. So those, anyway, those just interesting idea for for discussion.
Yeah.
All right, so you want to take a few questions
Sure.
now?
Let's do that.
All right, this one's actually for me, and I just saw it. David, was Nabil an actual genius? I don't know what the cutoff line is. We both took this IQ test once, and it said 168 for both of us, but it said that the test is not accurate over 130, right? So it's not saying that our IQs are 168. It's saying that once you hit 130, then the test is no longer accurate. It said you had to go get some specialized testing. So I don't know precisely what his IQ is. His IQ is apparently over 130. He would have had to have gotten a more particular score, but I don't even know what the kind of cutoff is for genius. I'll just say that guy was really smart in some very strange ways, and I would know he could like pay attention to multiple things at one time. Nabil and I would be laughing and giggling in the back of a classroom, class on genetics or something like this, and we'd be joking the entire time. I would get to the end of the class, I didn't hear one word, and the professor would say, any questions? And Nabil would raise his hand and start repeating the things the guy said, and then ask questions about it and so on. And so he was good at things like that. We've gotten several people have asked if you could explain a little more about Ismaili beliefs, but
Okay.
you mentioned that wasn't, that wasn't what you were, but anything you...
I can talk about it quickly. So
Mike,
Ismailis, there's probably like 10 million Ismailis in the world today. They're considered Shias. They consider themselves Shias. Some Shias don't like them because they're so different. And basically, Shia Muslims believe in 12 imams. So the 12th imam is Imam al-Mahdi, who's in hiding in a cave in Iraq or something. But Ismailis, they didn't stop at number 12 from descendants of Muhammad, and they continued all the way down to like 49 and 50. So the guy is alive today. His title is Aga Khan, Prince Shah Karim al-Husseini. He got in trouble with Trudeau because he invited Trudeau to his private island. He's like a rich guy, and all Ismailis pay 1/8 of the gross income to Aga Khan. Aga Khan means the king of kings.
Nice.
So they pay 1/8 of their wealth to him. They pray to him.
Well, that's interesting because Sunni sources say that the ultimate enemy is going to be one who calls himself the King of Kings. So.
So, anyways, yeah. So basically, he's Ismaili. I mean, he's the leader of the Ismailis, and he's like a modern kind of guy. That Ismailism is all about, like, being a good person and like going to the mosque and like being involved in charity work and stuff, and it's very, very watered down version of Islam, you can say. Mm-hmm. Right?
All right. And the first video I ever watched of your short testimony video, I was a little confused by that. You said, "Hey, Sunni and Ismaili," and I was like, "What? Why would they be?" Hey, look, we got a little guest in the background. I saw that. We had a little guest there in the background. Here we go. Abdullah Samir, has anyone you knew in person come out of Islam knowing he had done a lot for spreading Islam? So I guess you know a lot of ex-Muslims. So I guess more people like you who were actually trying to promote Islam, spreading Islam?
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing. Like, obviously the higher up that you go in Islam, the less incentive there is for you to like openly leave Islam, right? So like if you're like a Yasser Qadi type individual and you went to Harvard and you have serious doubts about Islam. I actually have a video on Yasser Qadi, right? And he actually admitted like some of the problems he found when he was studying in the West in academia. And like, why would you want to come out, right? Like, you would lose everything. Like, you might even be killed. Like he's probably much more risky for him. But I know people who studied in Medina. One guy I know who's like almost like a scholar. He can't come out because, again, his ex-wife has kids and it'll cause problems for him. I know so many people who left Islam, but like 99% of them are in the closet.
Yeah.
Like, almost nobody can come out. Now, the lucky thing is, in my case, my wife isn't going to leave me, thankfully. Her family is not Muslim. My family is liberal. They're liberal Muslims. They don't care if I leave Islam. They're like, my auntie was crying and stuff, but they're okay with it. So I took this responsibility on myself, and plus my personality is outgoing and stuff. So I was happy to speak about Islam and why Islam is false. and I'm safe in Canada. That's a big part of it. I'm not like this amazing, brave guy that's like a hero or whatever. No, I'm safe in Canada. My family doesn't care. My mom still loves me. My dad still loves me. My wife doesn't want to leave me. So why the hell don't I do this? You know what I'm saying? Like, why be selfish and keep all of this stuff to myself? Whereas there's other people in much more difficult situations, and so they can't come out. I know so many people that either the wife will leave them or they're scared to tell their parents. And so there's a big community of ex-Muslims under, like, it's like an iceberg that's just waiting to come out, you know? And I think there's going to come a point in time where a lot more of these people will actually come out publicly. I have a list on my blog of testimonies of people who left Islam. There's like over 30 people who personally contacted me and said, I left Islam because of you. But only a couple of them put the real names, which I hope as more time goes, they'll put the real names.
Yeah, and I agree with you that there's going to be a kind of tipping point where, and I think it may have already started, right? I mean, if you go back just 10 years ago, it was pretty rare for someone to there would be individuals, right? But it's not just like, hey, you see people all the time who are former Muslims announcing it and so on. Whereas now I see all kinds of people on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook who are ex-Muslims. So it seems that it's more acceptable now, and so you gotta wonder what it's going to be like in another 5 or 10 years. This one's a follow up for clarification. So Isaiah just wants clarification. Your wife is still a Muslim.
Yeah. Yeah. She prefers I don't speak about her, so I'll just say no comment. I'll say that she's not as religious as before. Let's put it like that.
That's good enough. Alan Rule says, Samir, in your opinion, who is the best Islamic apologist?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. Who is that? Okay, so, I don't think there's many people that are actually dealing with the real issues that ex-Muslims are bringing out. I think that the ones who are ahead of the game would be like Hamza Surtis. So Hamza Surtis, in a sense, I'm a fan of his because he's openly come out and said there's no scientific miracles in the Quran. He said that a lot of the claims that people used to make, like Zakir Naik, like, you know, miracles and embryology and mountainous pegs and all of these things, he's come out and said, I used to say these things. Now I don't say them anymore. So they're trying to take the dawah from a different angle. I think the Sufi Muslim community is ahead of the Salafi community because the Salafi community, Salafism, which is like Wahhabism, another name for Wahhabism, which is hardline, like black and white kind of Islam, is so dumb and it's so ridiculous that it's so easy to see through. Whereas like the Ahmadiyya Muslims and the Sufi Muslims, they're like, their version of Islam is a little bit harder to kind of like poke holes at. And they don't necessarily believe some of the things that like Salafis would say. Like, for example, was Muhammad, you know, married to a 9-year-old? They'll come up with all sorts of apologetics about why that's not the case. Whereas a Salafi Muslim will say, yes, and you would just accept that, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's the end of the story. So it's like so ridiculous that you don't even have to say anything. It's like obviously false. Whereas I think there's other Muslims who are kind of like a little bit ahead of the game. But I don't really know what my favorite apologist would be. Zakir Naik, maybe? Zakir Naik. Yeah. Naik is a joke, as you said in your video. I love that video.
Yeah, I would say it depends on what you mean. Because there are Muslims who are, there are Muslims in the world who are just, they're not even paying attention to arguments. They're just paying attention to like how loud you yell or how much you put the other guy down. And so for them, you might say, okay, well, this is your best apologist. Or there are other Muslims who are impressed if you can just spout off a bunch of Bible and Quran references, if you just know a bunch of references. They don't even care about looking it up and actually seeing if what you're saying is actually there. They just care that you sound like you're answering. So
you sound intelligent.
Yeah.
On the surface,
And then you have people who are really interested in looking into the issues and so on. So that might be a different guy. And then you have, who would Christians be worried about, right? Like what guy who's criticizing Christianity would you actually be worried about facing? And so basically it's going to be, depends on what your criteria are.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is what he says, Act 17 apologetics, which is me. It says, when are you going to change your name?
This is the number one the number one most important question I always get asked.
And he says that to me, so I'm hoping he doesn't mean me, because I'm never going to change my name. I'm David Wood till death. So
no, he means Abdullah because Abdullah means a slave of God, a servant of Allah. And this is the number one question that people ask me over and over and over and over and over. I'm talking about Muslims. Like, non-Muslims don't seem to care that much, but Muslims seem obsessed about this. It's like, this is the most important thing in your life, whether I change my name or not, or who I call myself. Like, the name that I'm given or the name that I use is like the least of your concerns. And
it's interesting because Nabil actually struggled with that when he became a Christian. He was like, he was talking about that for months. He was like, what should I change my name to? And after he decided that he was going to keep Nabil, I at least want to change my middle name. So his middle name was Asif, and so he wanted to change that to something with an A so he could keep the same initial. And he was actually thinking about anastasis, which is the Greek word for resurrection. So he's thinking about that. He never did it. He changed his mind over time. But when he became a Christian, it was a big deal for him. Like, what am I doing with this? What am I doing with this name here?
I think that I see the identity angle for sure, because many people change their names when they convert to Islam as well. And I feel like, your name actually does represent you in some ways. But in my case, I'm actually happy to keep calling myself Abdullah because it shows where I came from.
Yeah.
And honestly, the identity politics thing, I'm kind of tired of it now. And I even removed like atheist, secular, humanist, blah, blah, blah. I removed all that crap from my Facebook bio and my Twitter bio. I just say founder of, even ex-Muslim, I removed that. I just put founder of Light Upon Light and verse by verse Quran, or ex-founder or whatever, or previous founder or whatever. And that's it. And then people can look me up if they want to. If they want to know more about me, they can have a discussion with me. I don't need to like stick all these labels on myself. So
you are sticking with Abdullah Samir, just to be clear, right?
That's my brand name.
All right. That's his brand. It's like, Nike started making a different shoe. When is it going to change its name to something other than Nike? Come on. That's how you going to know? How you going to know it's Nike then? All right.
Yeah.
This is actually a good one here. Really good one. What would you tell Muslims to set them free from Allah?
That's. I'm
sure there's a lot of things, but I guess what are the main things you would want to get across to a Muslim? And the reason this is a really good question is we have Muslims over here in the chat. So what would you want to say to them to set them free?
I would start with I would go back to like why believe in the Quran in the first place. Like, get your Muslim opponent, to whoever you're talking to explain to you why should you believe. And this is called street epistemology. Anthony Magnabosco, his name is. He runs a channel called Street Epistemology, and it's also called, I think, the Socratic method, where you ask questions to the person. So like, oh, I'm Muslim. Why are you Muslim? Because the Quran's the word of God. Why is it the word of God? Because Allah sent it. Well, how do we know Allah sent it? Because of this and this. And you go and you have a conversation with them. I think that's the best way to do this. And I really like that approach if you have enough time to do it. Obviously, you can poke holes in the Quran and you can be like aggressive and you can, I think the worst thing to do is to start off with Muhammad is a pedophile. I think that's the worst, absolutely most dumbest way to start the conversation, because all it does is it creates barriers. The walls go up, the alarm bells go off, the guns come out, not the real guns, hopefully not the real guns, the imaginary guns come, and they start coming on the defensive, right? So you don't want to put them on the defensive. You want to have a sincere dialogue with them, and you want to ask them questions about what they believe, and then based on that, you can have a conversation with them. So yeah, that's how I would do it. And of course, like, if you have the arguments, if you have references, if you have like my blog, you can use that and you can say, well, what about this? And you can ask them some questions. And I always tell people, you're most welcome to leave a comment on the blog. If you disagree with me, explain to me why, and I'll delete the post if it's wrong, right? And I've deleted posts before, once or twice, right? So I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, people underestimate the importance of starting off by asking questions and so on. And like, I've had people tell me, David, I saw you blasting away in your video, so then I went and blasted my Muslim friend with that. And I'm like, don't do that. I mean, there are certain situations where you can do that. If you have, like with Nabil, I could be very aggressive with Nabil, and he could be very aggressive with me because we knew we were friends, right?
Yeah.
If I'm telling him something about Muhammad, he knows, hey, it's not because he hates me and wants me to die, or something like that. He's just okay. He feels strongly about this. That's why he's coming hard with that. But just, what I say in a YouTube video is not the same thing that I would say sitting beside a Muslim. I might give the same information, but I'm not going to be, YouTube is a different category of communication, right? You have to be entertaining and funny, and you can be all kinds of things on YouTube. But I tell people, I say, if you want to get across the information, I say normally I just start by asking questions. You have to find out where this person's at. So what do you believe about this? What do you believe about that? What do you believe about this? And after a lot of the what questions, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about that? And I said, then eventually transition into some why questions. Okay, so why do you believe that about the Quran? Why do you believe that about Muhammad? And get into some of those things. Why do you believe that about the Bible? Why do you believe that? Why do you believe these things? And then, if this is an ongoing conversation with someone that I'm going to be seeing multiple times, I will usually say, leave it at that, right? And say, hey, would you mind if I get back to you with some more questions and so on? Because then you actually have time to go back and think a little bit, look up some things, and that person's particular reasons for believing these things. And so what you need to study, right? Because if you don't know someone, that person might believe in whatever he believes in for 700 different reasons for all you know. And so you have to get those. But even with sensitive information, if you're having an ongoing conversation, you don't want to come out with Muhammad's a pedophile or something like that. But as the conversation is going on, you can bring up things like that in a fairly non-aggressive way. And I tell people, I say, hey, if you want to bring up something that's very sensitive and you don't want to drive the person away, there's a way to do that. You can say, look, there's this guy, just as an example, you say, look, there's this guy named David Wood, and he said this horrible thing about Muhammad in a video. Could you watch that video and then tell me how you as a Muslim would respond to it? Because I'd like, which you should want to know how Muslims are going to respond. You don't believe everything I say. Don't believe anything Abdullah here says. Don't believe everything that we believe just because we're saying it. If Muslims have a good response, you should be interested in that sort of thing. So, notice that's totally non-threatening. That's totally non-confrontational. You're asking them for their perspective, their input on something that someone else is saying, something that you're not saying it, someone else is saying it. And so you're asking for their feedback. And so, those would be some, those aren't tips just for talking to Muslims, by the way. That's good conversational skills. Good conversational skills right there. This one is actually related. In fact, it might be the exact same answer, but I'll put it up just because the question is slightly different here. What do you say is the greatest tool you've seen that works on convincing Muslims Islam is not true? Is there any greatest tool you would think of?
The internet. Oh
yeah. The internet. That was one of the first articles I ever wrote. Was back in probably 2006, 2007. It was how the internet was ultimately going to destroy Islam. Because Islam for 14 centuries has focused on keeping people insulated from hearing alternatives and from hearing criticisms. And so if all of a sudden you can now get into people's houses through technology, then that is going to be a problem. This one's actually for me here. Educated Huz said, funny how David never preaches the gospel to ex-Muslims. He's more obsessed with them leaving Islam than them finding Jesus. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Abdullah. Didn't we just discuss having some ongoing discussions about the existence of God and miracles and things like that? Didn't we? Yeah.
This is a very introductory video, and it was intended to be an interview of me. We're definitely going to continue. David Wood's going to come on my channel. I'm going to be asking him questions as well about atheism and why he believes in Christianity. I definitely want to have those conversations, but we wanted to start off with my story. So
and that's mainly the idea. I just tend to focus on the topic at hand, right? If I'm having an interview with Abdullah Samir about why he left Islam and what his views are now, we are not having. That's not a debate, right? We're not having a debate right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to be honest, what you're doing is unique, right? There's so many people preaching the gospel, but you're focusing on Islam, which is actually helpful because you specialized in it, and you know more than 99% of the Muslims I know. right? You know what I'm saying? So like, obviously there's some benefit in speaking about Islam. I mean, people say the same thing to me, like, why do you always talk about this and that? But, well, because by specializing, you can bring value to people, right? Like, that's part of the reason, right? As well.
Yeah, and I mean, still, I mean, you know, if there's a topic at hand, you know, I'll be honest. I've always thought I've never liked hey, here's this topic that we're having and we're discussing, but let me just tack the gospel on, right? Now I understand there are reasons for doing that. You believe the gospel is important, but even in the Bible, usually when someone preached the gospel, it's because that became an issue. Someone was asking some questions, some interest was raised or something like that, and then it was, oh, so you were just reading that Ethiopian eunuch, you were reading this passage. Do you understand that? Do you understand what you're reading? No, I've actually got some questions. Who is this prophecy talking about? Aha, okay. Let me share with you. So yeah, it's just, I mean, if we're talking about one thing, I've regarded it as, I mean, I understand that they're, you know, street preachers and they blast away, and I actually believe there are all kinds of different ministries that are going to reach different kinds of people. Just for me, if I'm talking about one thing, and one thing is the topic, and then I'm going to just tack on this other thing, I don't know. That I don't like that. If we're going to talk about if we're going to talk about the gospel, tacky, right? I would want to talk about, if we're going to talk about the gospel, I'd say, hey, let's have a discussion on the gospel. When you want to do it, let's lay aside some time and then talk about the gospel or something like that. So anyway, these are just different approaches, but guys, that's kind of mine. Here's one. Gerald Perry, Abdullah Samir, what do you think of the Muslim reasoning that the Quran can only be read in Arabic? Doesn't this minimize the majesty of Allah? How do Muslim apologists respond to this?
Yeah, I think it's silly to say that because, like, obviously every language is a set of symbols, and it's a set of symbols that carries meanings. So if there's a word in Arabic, there might not be a one-to-one connection between Arabic and English, but there might be multiple words for that one word, and so you can still explain what you mean. I mean, if I went to learn another language, that's how they would teach me. They would define the words, and they would say this means this means this, and over time you tend to learn the context, and you're able to put it in you're able to learn the subtle meanings of each one. But if someone wants to limit, the Quran, and this happens all the time. You left Islam because you don't know Arabic. If only you knew Arabic, you would be a believer. Well, what about my friends like Hassan Radwan that is Arabic and he also doesn't believe in Islam, and he studied Arabic at university? Like, come on. No. He didn't do PhD. Oh, what? Like, come on. Like, if I come to Islam, I don't need to know Arabic. I can just read the English translation of the Quran and say, oh, I like this. If I want to leave Islam, you need to be like a PhD or something. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and what you just pointed out, very, very important in terms of, wait a minute, you're telling me that when you're preaching Islam and telling me what to believe and knowing how to do my prayers and all these things, then I'm fine believing all of these things, believing in Islamic theology without understanding Arabic or without being a master of Arabic. Yes, that's all fine. Okay, well, if I see a problem, what then? Then, you have to be a master of Arabic, or you just can't know anything about this. And, that's just silly. Because, I mean, think about this, right? The vast majority of the most educated people in the world do not speak Arabic, do not understand Arabic. And so you're basically saying that Islam is irrelevant to all of them. And even with all their great knowledge and learning, Islam is completely useless to them because they don't speak a particular language. And I actually have one of my favorite videos I ever made was called "Why the Quran Was Revealed in Arabic." And so Gerald, if you type in why the Quran was revealed in Arabic, my video should pop up. And there I actually show that according to the Quran, the reason the Quran was revealed in Arabic was that all other people had received their prophets, and other groups like Christians and Jews, they had their books in their languages, but the Arabs were the last people to receive a revelation. And that's why Muhammad was the seal of the prophets. It was because he was the Arabs were the last people. And the reason the Quran was revealed in Arabic was specifically so that Arabs would have a revelation that they could understand in their own language. And you even have it in the Quran that on Judgment Day, if the Arabs were the only people who didn't have their own revelation and that they could understand in their own language, that they would have a fair excuse against Allah to say, hey, we would have served Allah better than other people if only we had had a revelation in our own language. So think about how significant that is, that according to the Quran was revealed in Arabic so that you didn't have to learn another language to understand the will of God, right? Because guess what? There were Jews who had the Torah and there were Christians who had the gospel. Allah doesn't say, oh, you Arabs, go learn their language so that you can understand their scriptures. It was, no, you need a revelation in your own language. So what sense does it make for Muslims now to be saying that everyone in the world needs to go and learn this other language so that they can understand the book, when the purpose of revealing the book is so that a particular group would have a revelation in their own language that they could understand for themselves without learning this additional language.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's an amazing point.
For some reason, this has come up a couple of times. I do not know why. What are your views on Hitler, Abdullah Samir?
You know why? Because I'm atheist, so they want to get into the whole morality argument.
Oh, so they want you to say he's evil, so they can say, well, aha, you believe in good and evil. Now, what's the?
Yeah,
okay.
Something like that, or no, you can't condemn him because you don't believe in objective morality. I'd love to have a longer discussion on this, but just to very quickly answer. I don't believe in objective morality. I am a humanist, but I believe it's arbitrary that we selected, like we put ourselves at the top, humans, and human life is sacred, not for any inherent reason except that we just chose it to be. So obviously, like, I don't have any sort of foundation for that other than to reduce human suffering is my morality. And I have an article I wrote about atheism and morality. So I would condemn Hitler under that and say that he obviously killed many people and caused lots of suffering, and this was bad for that reason. That's basically it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I say one thing?
Sure.
So my favorite video of yours is the Hajj video. I love that video. Like where you talked about how Muhammad said that Abraham was the one that came and built the Kaaba, and how, fact-checking that doesn't make any sense, right? And how he went to Masjid when he went on the night journey, Isra wal Miraj, he went to a mosque that didn't exist yet. Mm-hmm. Like that to me is my favorite video. I always send that video to people. Someone was asking about Hajj. I didn't go for Hajj. I went for Umrah, which is like it's not the actual Hajj ceremonies, but you go around 7 times and you run between Safa and Marwa, the 2 mountains. So we did that, and the whole family went for Umrah, and I thought it was cool. It was like a little fantasy land I was living in where I thought, oh, it's where the Prophet was, and this is so cool, and whatever. Mm-hmm. But like, I never cried when I saw the Kaaba. Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, oh, you're going to cry when you see it. And I was like looking at it. I'm like, it's smaller than I thought. That was the first thing that came to mind. I'm like, yeah, this is smaller than I thought. And then I was like, I'm not crying. Like, am I supposed to like be emotional and stuff about this? But no, it's just like a building. Like, whatever.
Because you don't have enough faith, man.
I'm not a true Muslim. No. That's the problem.
It's in Surah 117. He who sees the Kaaba shall weep.
Yeah. So that was my favorite video. I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, that's cool. I don't remember much of what I said about that in that video. I have to go back and check it. I don't watch most of my videos after I watch it when I'm editing it, and then I post it, and then and then 5 years later I have no idea what I said. I have a general idea of what I said about it. Yeah. What do most Muslims struggle with?
I think in general, like, Islam is so burdensome in general. Like, there's so many rules and so many things you can't do in the West, like living among non-Muslims especially, but even in the East, I would say that, like, can't listen to music for some Muslims. Many Muslims can't have to eat halal meat. When you go out, like, what if there's no halal meat? You have to eat vegetarian or eat fish. And then you have to pray 5 times a day. Like, I used to go at my office and pray in stairwells or in conference rooms. It was like pretty embarrassing. I had to wash my feet in the sink at the office. That was also very embarrassing. So I think in general, Islam is very burdensome. And there's a lot of guilt and a lot of fear that Muslims go through every day. Am I a good enough Muslim? Am I going to go to paradise? Does Allah love me? I think that Muslims in general nowadays, they struggle with the morality of Islam, like the slavery thing, how the Quran allows slavery, how Muhammad may have had a child bride a lot of these things I think Muslims struggle with. And, the Western values are actually, especially I'm talking about Western Muslims. I never lived in a Muslim country except Egypt for a few months. So all of my experiences I'm talking about are with Muslims that either were born in Canada or immigrated to Canada. And so they were probably intelligent and they had a business, or they came on their own merits, right? So they're not the same type of crowd you'd find in Pakistan, for example, or Saudi Arabia or whatever, right? But these guys, I think they struggle with all non-Muslims are going to hell. Yet my friend, he's a good guy and he's going to hell. So how do I make sense of that? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
What do you think? You probably have some insight on this too.
No. I mean, I was thinking, how would I know what most Muslims struggle with? I know what particular Muslims struggle with, and I've seen particular Muslims, and I know what they were struggling with. But I wouldn't know what most Muslims are struggling with. But your answer, your response makes sense.
Okay, awesome. I think the Hadith as well. There's somebody mentioned black dogs in the chat. There's so much garbage in the Hadith that Muslims are, not to say the Quran doesn't have garbage in it too. I mean, I have to say the Quran has lots of garbage in it too.
But there's far more in the Hadith just because they're far more massive collections. But you may have noticed this too. It seems like Muslims are more and more going Quran only without really understanding what it means to go Quran only.
Or in not coherently knowing why they're rejecting certain hadith, not having a good reason to say, I don't like the hadith where he burned the eyes of the people and gave them camel urine. I can't say why I don't like it. I mean, I can say why I don't like it, but I can't give a good reason for rejecting it because it's in an authentic collection. So it becomes a selective, I only accept the hadith that are good. Or what does that mean, good?
That I like, yeah.
That I like. What? It doesn't make sense. You can't do that.
Yeah, and it's just a huge interesting thing. Now, almost every time I quote a hadith, I'll hear from some Muslim who says, but that's not the Quran. I'll go, well, you praying 5 times a day is not in the Quran. What are you talking about? What reciting the Shahada? You have a Shahada in the Quran. It's not. It doesn't include, and Muhammad is his messenger, right? You get that from the Hadith. They don't realize so many of their practices. I mean, you're supposed to take the pilgrimage, and you're supposed to do your prayer. As far as the details on how those things work, so much of Islam comes from the Hadith. So for them to be tossing those out, just to avoid some embarrassing stuff, pretty rough. Here's a good one. 3 questions to a Muslim. If you had, basically, there are people here, they know Muslims. If you could give them, 3 questions to ask their Muslim friends. Now, it's kind of on the spot right now, right? But,
what 3 questions would I ask if I only had 3 questions?
Yeah. Basically, if people are watching and they've got some Muslim friends, what should be 3 good questions to ask their Muslim friends?
Honestly, I think one of the strongest arguments. Okay, there's a couple of things. One of them is, how do you reconcile science and the Quranic worldview, and in particular evolution? Because evolution is a huge, I think it's a knockout blow for the Quran, because you can't. It's very difficult to, and I guess I would see it as a problem with Christianity too, because Adam and Eve, I don't think there was any first human. I don't know how you would kind of deal with that.
There has to be a first human.
Well,
right? There would have to be, right? I mean, there, even whatever you want to believe, there has to be someone there. Yeah, you would say there's someone before that, right? But there, I mean, there's.
But there's no cutoff point where the now it's a gray area. That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's what you would say.
Yeah, so I guess that would be one of the things. How do you reconcile science in the Quran? How do you reconcile morality in the Quran? And how do you justify Muhammad's actions as being the best man that ever lived? So those would be the 3 things, and those are the main reasons why people leave Islam.
Let's see. Is there any sources you have on the perspective that the Quran was combined together from the Torah, the Bible, etc.? If yes, could you talk about it. So I guess they're wondering about, is there a book or something like that?
I stopped using the argument about like the Torah and the stories in the Quran coming from previous books, because it's more difficult to prove that. And I'm not saying it's not true. Like you gave specific examples. Someone like you was more knowledgeable with the Bible and these apologetics is able to kind of have these dialogues. But for someone like me that doesn't know the Bible, it's much more difficult for me to prove these things. So I don't even use the arguments. I have other arguments I use about in general why I don't believe Islam is true. A lot of them have to do with science in the Quran. Some of them have to do with what Muhammad did. And I have a post on on the main page of my blog. I have my top articles against Islam, and that's what I use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know there are books that deal with the sources of the Quran. In fact, there's one by I think it was written in the 1800s by Tisdall, I think his name is. But
okay.
normally though, like I'm more familiar with looking at them on a case by case basis. In other words, looking at a particular story in the Quran and then looking up where that comes from and so on.
Yeah.
Rather than here's a collection of them. Here's a book that goes through them. But Tisdall does discuss a bunch of examples, and you can actually get that on the Answering Islam website. So if you go to answering-islam.org, you guys just start looking at the Quran, and you'll there's a Quran tab, then go to there and start looking up sources of the Quran. And so we find...
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point, because there's different places for different things. Like some of them, like you said, come from the Talmud. The whole Alexander romance ended up in the Quran. The Syriac Alexander romance ended up as Dhul-Qarnayn. The infancy gospel and some of the other stuff ended up with the stories of Jesus, the heretical kind of beliefs about Jesus. There's many different sources for each one of them, I guess, each one of the stories in the Quran. And it's quite fascinating when you look into this stuff. Like academics have done an amazing job. I think his name was Budge in the 1800s or the late 1800s. He did research, and he's the one that translated the Syriac Alexander romance into English, and that's when people started to see it and notice the similarities between that one and the Quran. So I think academics have done a great job on this, but I don't know any one particular book. I guess Answering Islam would be a good source.
So they have a collection, and Tisdall's book is there as well. The whole text is there. Where did that go? Now here we go again. Fred Gentz, check this out. David, if the gospel is not presented, this live stream will be useless. Notice he say it's useless, right? Now, guys, this is just the attitude is amazing, right? Because I understand saying, hey, present the gospel, something like that. I understand, hey, you're a Christian, present the gospel, and so on. The idea that everything is useless, right? That there is no point in listening to this man's story, that there is no point in understanding what issues he had with Islam, that there's no point in anything. There's no point in undermining Islam. But let me put it this way. Suppose we never mentioned Christianity, and Abdullah here gave slam dunk, knockdown responses on why Islam is false. You want to say that is useless, and I assume you're talking about from some eternal perspective or so on. But it's just nonsense to say it's useless, right? Useless in what sense, right? Let me put it this way. If an ISIS jihadi is about to chop your head off and someone says, hey, I can convince you that Muhammad's a false prophet. And he says, okay, go ahead, try. And the guy convinces him that Muhammad's a false prophet and he doesn't chop your head off. Was that useless? Suppose he never mentions the gospel. He just convinces this ISIS jihadi not to chop your head off. Was that useless or was that useful? Right?
Yeah.
So come on, guys, be realistic here.
You get all kinds, I guess.
Or let's take it from a different direction, right? Check this out. Okay, so we've had all of this discussion. Now, if I say right now, Abdullah, you are you have sinned according to God. And so since you sinned, you are not righteous enough to dwell in the presence of a perfect, holy, righteous God. So you've got a problem, namely that you can't be good enough to dwell with God. But the message of the gospel is that God is going to give you his righteousness. He's going to clothe you in his righteousness. And how he did this was by Jesus, the Son, the divine Son, entering creation, dying on the cross for your sins, so that he takes the penalty for your sins upon himself, and now he applies his righteousness to you. So that is the gospel in a nutshell. Fred, are you going to say that now, right now, because I pointed that out, now it's useful, but before it was useless? Because I pointed this out, right? If we're having a discussion and we're answering questions and I say, but let me insert the gospel into the middle of this thing. I just don't think that does justice to the gospel, right? I think the gospel is really, really important. I think it's this huge, important thing. And yes, there are times when you just want to give someone a tract or something like that and say, here's what the gospel is. I understand that. But I also believe that Abdullah has heard what I just said before. And therefore, if we're going to have a discussion, it's going to be a discussion about why he should believe it, why he should take these things seriously. And that's going to be kind of a big discussion, right? Not just, hey, let's insert that into the middle of everything else in a way that doesn't impact him at all, right? So, anyway,
exactly.
That's my view. All right, so elaborate more on the infancy gospel stories. Let's see. Here we go. He says, can you elaborate more on the infancy gospel stories Abdullah mentioned? Do Christians consider these stories to be fake? How did these stories originate and end up in Arabia? So do you want to just tell them what we're talking about there again?
I think you'd be able to answer that one better than me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so no, as far as I'm aware of, I don't know of any Christians today who take some of these non-canonical gospels that were written from basically the 2nd century all the way up into the 6th century, right? And there are reasons for it. There are reasons that you have the infancy gospels, right? If you read the gospels, you have Jesus, right? You have Jesus, and he's a baby or a toddler, and then you have an instance when he's a teenager in Luke, and then you have him when he's an adult. That's it, right? So there was so
academics also know that these were fabricated in order to score points, right? To win over these arguments. Mm-hmm. So they're known to be like fabricated documents.
Yeah, and so there was this tendency to try and fill in all these gaps in Jesus' life, right? Like what happened between when he was a baby and when he was a teenager, what happened between when he was a teenager and when he was an adult, and that basically allowed people to write things. And a lot of the reason for doing that was to win some sort of theological discussion, right? You're having a discussion about theology. Well, guess what? I just found this source. Look here, I got my source. So no, people don't take these seriously, and that's the problem, right? You have stories in the Quran, like Jesus speaking at birth, Jesus giving life to clay birds when he was a child. He was created, and we know where these stories come from. They don't come from anywhere near the 1st century, right? They're not 1st century sources. They're later sources that people made up. So the fact that they're in the Quran, that shows, one, that they were circulating in Arabia, but it also shows Muhammad could not tell the difference between a true story and a false story, right? Yeah. The only thing Muhammad knew is this is a story someone is telling.
Yeah,
this is a story that certain Christians are reciting. It's just a problem. And so basically what you have to believe as a Muslim, what you would have to believe as a Muslim here is you'd have to say, you've got this story about, let's say, Jesus giving life to clay birds. And we know where the story comes from, right? We can trace it back and see where this story originated. But I also believe, this is what you would have to believe as a Muslim, I also have to believe that this somehow goes back to the 1st century, and that this person who came up with the story was actually either directly inspired himself, or he had some unknown source that we've lost, and it did go back to the 1st century, and so he had records of it, something like that. So it becomes this you could believe that if it were just one thing, right? You could do that if it was one thing, because that sort of thing can happen, right? A person in the second, third, fourth, fifth century could have some source that we no longer have access to.
Yeah.
But when you're seeing a pattern with the stories that are from the Talmud, with the stories that are from these later Christian sources and so on, you see this pattern over and over again, that Muhammad's telling a story that's circulating in Arabia during the 7th century. He passes it off as revelation. We can trace the origin of the story. We know where the story began. And the Muslim has to say, well, somehow it just goes back much earlier, even though we have no record of it.
Yeah, and it's funny that all of these are available in Syriac, in a language similar to Arabic, in a place close to where Muhammad lived. And then they end up in the Quran. Like, I mean, how much more red flags do you need? It's like spelt out for you there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Same thing with the Dhul Qarnayn story. Like, it perfectly matches the Syriac Alexander the Great. Like, how much more do you need to know that he just copied it from there? Like, it's so obvious.
Yeah, and what's interesting is now every time I mention, because I used to just say Alexander the Great, right? And so here you have Alexander the Great finding the place where the sun sets.
Yeah.
And Muslims respond, it's not Alexander the Great, right? They flip out over it now, even though for centuries it was accepted that it's Alexander the Great. But now,
because they found out, right, about Alexander being a polytheist.
Yeah, they found out Alexander's as pagan as you could possibly be, right? And so they realized it's not making sense for him to be a devout Muslim here.
Yeah.
And so they said, no, it's someone else. It's Cyrus or something like that. And so I'm gonna have to make this a good video project for you or me or for both of us on our channels. That, going through the Alexander romances and sort of going verse by verse through Surah 18 and showing, no, we know exactly where all of this, let me put it this way. If you're going to say, hey, basically verse for verse, we have these, we know exactly where these stories are coming from, but it's actually not this guy. Wow, you guys have some awesome faith there.
And there's a great article on Wiki Islam called Dhul Qarnayn and the Alexander the Romance. So it basically has like what you just said, like point by point, Alexander the Romance translated by Budge. Dr. Budge, and then here's the Quran, and point by point, and like every single point is like matching.
Yeah.
It's astounding, like just how many details overlap. So either the Quran copied Alexander the Romance, or the Alexander the Romance copied the Quran. It's just too much. So whoever's saying it's not Alexander, like they're just like in denial. It's just too obvious. Like
it's interesting what happens then, because when I see them flipping out and saying, it's not Alexander, I think, oh, we got a touchy topic there, huh? All right, I know my next big project. This one's for you. He says, have you ever gone over Nabil's content? I guess I don't know if they're talking about videos or books or whatever, or lectures. I was just asking you if you're familiar with Nabil's material, I guess.
Yeah, I heard about Nabil Qureshi, and, rest in peace, he died. I was going to get his book eventually. The Case for Christ, I think it's called. Something like that.
That's Lee Strobel.
What's his book called?
Nabil had 3. His main book was Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus.
Ah, yes, that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, I was hoping to read it. I never got to. I saw a few of his videos, but not as familiar with his content. I know he used to be Ahmadi as well. Yeah. So I had another Ahmadi friend, Reason on Faith, who wanted me to actually ask you about that. Like, did you guys get into the whole Ahmadiyya apologetics? Because Ahmadiyyas, they hold a little bit non-standard views on the Quran, and they don't believe in miracles per se. They have these funny reinterpretations of the stories in the Quran, where when Solomon was about to crush the ants, they say they're not ants. They were like a little army or something. They have these they don't believe in miracles, and they don't believe in talking animals, and so they have all these funny reinterpretations. Did you guys ever get into that?
No, I mean I've mentioned. Well, yeah, we eventually got into the Ahmadi stuff, but that was me bringing it up, knowing that he was an Ahmadi. But okay. I pointed out that no, when Nabil and I were having our discussions, he was trying to prove to me that Muhammad was a prophet. that the
Okay.
Quran is the word of God. And the arguments he used were basically the same, perfect preservation, scientific miracles are the same things you hear from Muslim apologists in general.
Okay.
The exception was that with the crucifixion, because Ahmadis don't believe that Jesus died by crucifixion. They believe he was nailed to a cross.
Oh, yes,
But
yes.
even people like Zakir Naik and Shabir Ali now present that position and so on. So that even that wasn't terribly unorthodox. But yeah, I eventually decided to go on the offense against Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and I got one of his books, and I was reading it, and I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever. It was page after page of him bragging about how brilliant his arguments were. And there was like the stupidest stuff I've ever read. Now I read something by another book by a later Ahmadi,
Yeah.
and I don't remember if this one came from Mirza Ghulam Ahmad or the later guy, but it was like, if God were a trinity, then every planets would be triangles and not planets, not spherical, right? And so I was like, but then they're just going on about how brilliant these arguments are, and it sort of reminds me of like the chest thumping of lots of Muslim apologists,
Yeah.
where if your audience isn't really following your argument, but you're just, this is the most brilliant thing anyone's ever said, then hey, maybe you'll convince someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone by that.
Yeah.
Now this is interesting. I haven't. Zahra here was one of the ones who said, who asked if we could, if we're going to have some questions. She says, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and so. Matter of fact, we only have a few minutes left because I certainly don't want to go over 2 hours. I see I'm only like barely halfway down the scrolling through the comments here, and that's after I started asking for questions.
Yeah.
So I want to scroll down and look to see, because Zahra is a Muslim and she was the one who said, "Hey, can we have some questions?" So I want to scroll down there to see if we have any questions from her or from the Muslims here. But she said, Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a prophet and a messenger. Now, you got to love this reasoning here, by the way. Look at this reasoning. Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a prophet and a messenger. Messengers convey from God. And the Quran was revealed to him. That's why we know he is a prophet.
It's called a circular argument.
Yeah, that you can't get more circular than that, right? Muhammad is a prophet. Muhammad is a prophet. Prophets convey from God. The Quran was revealed from him. That's why we know he's a prophet.
Yeah.
That's now, again, there are a ton of questions here. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to scroll down to look and see if there's anything from Zahra. Let's see. I'll just post her comments here. She says, now she's responding to other people's comments here, so she was in a discussion over here. She says, he was called crazy, a poet, and a madman. He was boycotted.
Good
He
question.
experienced many hardships along with those that started following him. You think he claimed it just because it was fun? So notice this is actually an important point here. Do you think? I think the gist here is: do you think he was not just because it was fun, but do you believe? And so I'll go ahead and give what I think is the heart of her response here. Do you think Muhammad was deliberately making this up? That he's really doing it deliberately for worldly gain, or did he really believe that he was a prophet? Because apparently, Top Student had said something about Muhammad was just doing it, because of whatever he's getting out of it or something like this. And she's saying, but look, he was called names. He was boycotted, tons of hardships. Why would he do that unless he actually believed it?
That is an amazing, great question, and something that many, many Muslims struggle with, and they want to have an answer for it. I actually have a YouTube video I did on this. It's one of my favorite videos. It's called The Science of Prophethood, and what I believe, what I think is, okay, we'll never know for sure what was going on in Muhammad's head. But what we can see is that it appears that early on he may have suffered from something called temporal lobe epilepsy. This is something that can happen when you do extreme meditation. if you do too much meditation, or maybe if you have mental illness and some sort of mental illness, temporal lobe epilepsy can feel like God is talking to you. Like you can hear things, you can see things, auditory illusions, hallucinations, I mean. He saw and he was like, there's a bunch of, one of my friends, Abdullah Gondal, has made a whole post on, signs that he had some sort of mental illness. And there's a video by the Box of Islam series, which is like 2 hours long, that goes through all of the evidence that he had some sort of mental illness. But to me, it is crystal clear that as time went by, he was milking this. He may have been sincerely believing that he spoke to God or something. Again, you know that he spoke to Khadija, and Khadija might have been the one that convinced him that you were speaking to God, whereas he thought it was a devil or something, right? And so he may have been suffering from some mental issues. He may have been seeing things, and then he realized that people will believe me if I say this, because he lived in a time and place where if he said, "Oh, God spoke to me," and people would be like, "Oh, you're the messenger of God." But he clearly milked this, right? He started saying, "I'm going to marry Zainab because God told me that I have to let everybody know the most important thing of all. If in case your adopted son divorces her wife, then I want believing men to know that you can marry your adopted son's ex-wife." Like, that's the most important thing that God wants humanity to know, like that he puts in his final revelation. So that's clear that he was getting advantages from this. Like, you've done a very good job in showing how he, like Aisha, Christians in general have done an excellent job in pointing out the moral hypocrisy of Muhammad, of how he benefited greatly. Like I've talked about this as well, but like basically marrying his choice of women, like allowing his soldiers to sleep with women and not without marriage, and have sex with the slaves, and so clearly he was benefiting from this. Why didn't he accept this? So there's a so-called deal that the disbelievers offered him. They said, "We'll give you power, we'll give you wealth, we'll give you money," early on in his prophetic career. So why didn't he accept that? Is a big question. Well, there's very easy answer to this. One is he didn't believe them. He didn't trust them. He thought maybe they'll just kill him in his sleep or something. Or three, he didn't care because he's like, I already have more than this. I have people pretty much worshipping me, even though he didn't call it that. But they were like worshipping him. They were drinking his saliva and like collecting his wudu water and drinking it, and
even his blood.
I saw that video of yours where Zubair ibn Awam was even reported that he drank his blood. So like, and his auntie was collecting his sweat, and like, so they were pretty much worshipping the guy. Like, non-Muslim, one of the non-Muslims said, "I've never seen like a man that's respected by his companions, like Muhammad is respected by his companions." But like pretty much like he had people like worshipping him. So like he doesn't need these deals from these people, right? So like that's an easy enough explanation, I think.
Yeah. And my basic view is I believe that Muhammad was convinced that he was a prophet, and so but we have so many of these issues like Zainab and Muhammad getting more wives than other people got, and the situation with Sauda, and him making an oath to his wives that he would stop having sex with his slave girl, and then getting a revelation. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, look up Surah 66, verses 1-2. That's a response after Muhammad took an oath to stop having sex with his slave girl. Allah steps in and says, "Hey, I didn't tell you to make that oath," and so it was telling him, "Hey, I didn't tell you to make that oath, so you don't have to keep it. So you can go back to having sex with your slave girl." He eventually got her pregnant, and so these kinds of things. There, the issue is, it's okay if he sincerely believed that he was a prophet. Was he adding things on deliberately, or were these just sort of affecting his subconscious, and then they come out perhaps through the temporal lobe epilepsy and stuff? I don't know enough about that. I know Brother Rashid is a big proponent of that as well. That because he's pointing out that it can, the disorder can actually do things that really line up. Like it can give you like turbocharged sex drive and stuff like that. That these episodes can do that and stuff, and then you read about Muhammad having sex with 9 women and girls in one night and stuff like that. So anyway, might fit, but
oh, sorry, I misquoted. It wasn't Abdul Hamid and Box of Islam. It was Brother Rashid.
Oh, okay.
Has a video called "Muhammad in the Light of Science and Medicine." Beautiful video. It goes in detail about like proof that he was suffering from some sort of like mental illness. And like you said, like basically extreme narcissists, like they can't differentiate between like themselves and like God. They think they're God pretty much. Like if God is if they want something, God tells them, do this. Like so we don't know. Maybe he was that self-deluded, or maybe he was just taking advantage of people. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. Right? Like it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Either way, it's not Muhammad's revelations from about Zainab and all these things. He was either deluded into thinking, hey, I'm really getting a revelation from God, saying that God wants me to take the wife of my own adopted son. Or it was deliberate. So, that affects our view of him a little bit and stuff, but it's either way, that's not coming from God, and it's not something that anyone should be following. Here's another one from Zahra, and there's one more comment I wanted to get to because it's a good way to conclude, but one more from Zahra here. She says, I have a question. What do you think about people that revert to Islam and get abuse and kicked out by their families?
Yeah, that happens. But I think in general, I think in today's world in general, it's much more likely that you will face abuse for leaving Islam than accepting Islam. Mm-hmm. Yes, people do face abuse for all sorts of reasons, including converting to Islam. But in general, people in the West, in Canada, US, I'm just speaking about maybe like, let's just limit it to Canada and the US because that's what I know. In general, people are not they're more tolerant in general and they're more accepting, maybe because of the Enlightenment and like tolerant and secular values nowadays. People are not, they're mostly okay with that. And my own dad, when I converted from Ismailism to Sunnism, he was like very tolerant and loving. He's like, you know what? It's up to you, however you want to worship God. If I would have told him I converted to Christianity, he would have been fine with it. Mm-hmm. So, yes, people do, but like, so what? We should allow people to, we should allow people to follow whatever religion they want to. So for Zara, whoever's saying this, okay, yes, that's a bad thing, and we should help people. If someone wants to be Muslim, I support the right to be Muslim. If someone wants to be Christian, I support the right to be Christian, as long as they're not imposing the religion on me, right? Mm-hmm. As long as you're not putting your laws that I cannot do this onto me. You can follow, if you don't want to drink alcohol, by all means, but you don't have a right to tell me that it's haram to drink alcohol because that's my own choice. Of course, unless it's the law of the land. And of course, I'll respect the law of the land, and we can debate that in society. The benefits of alcohol or not allowing it or whatever, banning it. But that's where I draw the line. It's
yeah. And so what I find amazing here is that someone like Zahra is basically looking for us to say, you shouldn't. You shouldn't be abused or something like that, or attacked or something like that because you've converted to Islam. But the moral point she's trying to make here, if you actually believe that, Zahra, why do you believe in a prophet who said if anyone leaves his Islamic religion, kill him and carry out the Sharia penalties even against your own family members? Right? You have a prophet who's saying, look, you would have to kill your own family members if you're going to carry out the penalties, right?
Yeah.
He said both of those things. Yeah.
One thing I would kind of say to that is that as a Muslim, I believed and I was taught that a Muslim cannot implement Sharia law on their own. So vigilantism is not allowed. So let's say, my brother left Islam. I cannot go and kill him. I would not be allowed to do that. What would happen is I would have to go to a judge or to the police or whatever, which is what happens in some Muslim countries, and report him or whatever. And if he openly says that he left Islam and he doesn't repent, then the state would put a punishment on him that he would be killed, which is sad and unfortunate. But I wouldn't be allowed to kill him myself, right? So I like to make that distinction. That and the thing is, there are Muslims today which are thankfully saying that the punishment for apostasy was something that was connected to treason, which I don't buy it because there's just way too many examples of hadith. Mm-hmm. That are kill the guy that left Islam and this person was left. And even the funniest thing is Jonathan Brown tried to use the example, which is the dumbest example he could have come up with, which was Abdullah ibn Abi Sar. And he said, look, they didn't kill him. But
Muhammad
said,
wanted to him. Yeah, he was mad.
To kill him,
yeah.
and you guys, So that's like the funniest example that he used in a video where he said, "But look, he didn't actually kill Abdullah ibn Abi Salih." Like, what?
Wow.
You couldn't have picked a worse example. But in general, I do believe that many Muslims nowadays are kind of, especially the Sufi Muslims. So Hamza Yusuf and his Sheikh Abdullah bin Daya, they are openly saying that like you can Google this, outdated religious laws should be changed. So they had a forum in Morocco. He studied in Morocco. He's a Sufi, like Sunni Muslim. And they are actually saying that Islam is compatible with democracy. They're saying Sharia law should not be implemented, like the hudud part of the Sharia law of praying and all that should be implemented, but not the part about like killing adulterers, stoning adulterers, and like chopping off the hand. He's like, we don't need this anymore because it's not in line with the goal of Sharia to preserve life and to preserve Islam. It's actually turning more people away from Islam. Mm-hmm. So there's a big part of Sunni Muslims now, Sunni Muslim scholars, were saying, we don't want this anymore. It's not appropriate in today's world. Mm-hmm. It was appropriate back then, and it had so-and-so reason, which I don't think is like necessarily, I don't agree with them on that. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy for this, right? Like I don't necessarily buy the reasoning, and I think what they're doing is reforming Islam without using that name. Mm-hmm. Because reform is a 4-letter word in Islam. Like people can't reform Islam because it's perfect. So how can you reform something that's perfect? So they can't say that they're reforming it, but they can see that these are bad things and they don't want it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's actually causing a lot of problems in the Muslim community. People are leaving Islam because of the fact that if you leave Islam, you'll be killed. They're like, why? I don't want anything to do with a religion that wants to kill people for leaving Islam. Because look at all these good people I know they're not Muslim. Like, should they be killed, right? Mm-hmm. Or these people I know that left Islam, or my family member or whatever, right? It doesn't make sense to them that if a Christian converts to Islam, they're not killed. Nobody wants to kill that guy. But if the guy goes from Islam to Christianity or Islam to atheism, he has to be killed. So it doesn't add up in their mind. So it's causing problems for the Muslims and so some of the scholars. And it's not taqiyya. They actually don't consider this to be something that's practical and should be implemented today. They're not hiding. This is actually what they want. They don't want Sharia law. But on the other hand, you have Islamists. Now, I opened up a whole can of worms just when we were about to close, unfortunately.
You're good.
Obviously, Islamists don't agree with this, like Hizb ut-Tahrir, all of the Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, they think that Sharia law has to be implemented and we need Sharia law. And they disagree with Hamza Yusuf and all of these guys that are saying we don't want it. So there's some tension in the Muslim community, but I really do hope that as time goes by, the ones that don't want hudud punishments will win over the ones that do want it. And there's always going to be a clash, and there's going to be a debate, continual debate going on. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and couple of things. You mentioned that normally under Sharia, if there are charges against a person, there's supposed to be a trial, witnesses are supposed to be brought forward,
exactly.
and so on. So that is what you would get. I mean, in the Muslim sources, when someone is accused of adultery, they would come to Muhammad and so on. The issue I have is that very easy to misunderstand that, right? I mean, if you're reading and you see, if anyone leaves his Islamic religion, kill him. Yeah. Oh wait, that guy left his Islamic religion, right? Or Muhammad's ordering his followers.
And there was examples where people killed a like slave girl.
Yeah.
And that was not through a trial. The guy just killed his slave.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing that's perfect is that Muhammad basically said, okay, well, no recompense payable for her blood. So it's, hey, yes, in theory you should have brought charges, but you went ahead and killed her, but no problem, because, she was doing some bad stuff there. So it does look like there's some room to slide. On the issue of reforming Islam and so on, I think that I agree with the Islamists on what Islam actually teaches. But I've often thought, I thought years ago, because I was thinking, how would I make an argument that Islam could be reformed if I were a Muslim? And I think I've got a better argument than most of the people. Most of the people that you hear, and I don't mean like the legitimate scholars who are actually doing work on why you should not impose these penalties. I just mean the Western people who say, oh, that's not what Islam teaches. Oh, no, they don't teach. Muhammad didn't teach that. They just deny it. So those people I don't even take seriously. Yeah. But I've often thought that you could basically argue along these lines, right? When Muhammad was in Mecca, he taught his followers to preach a message of peace and tolerance. God's going to judge you in the future. But hey, if we have a disagreement, hey, let's not start killing each other, because that's what was in the best interest of the Muslim community at the time.
Yeah.
Later he received Surah 22, where he could start fighting defensive jihad. He was in no position to take over Arabia or anything like that, but it was in the best interest of the Muslim community at that time to start fighting defensively and so on. Later, when he was the most powerful force in Arabia, the message changed again to, now you violently subjugate this area. And so I'm sitting there looking, I'm saying, because if you look at the commentaries and so on, it's, well, Islam got to a place where now the message was, offensive jihad and so on. But I was thinking, if I wanted to argue it, and I don't think I've ever shared this before. I was thinking, if I were going to argue, I would say, yeah, but look at the assumption that's under all of this. Namely, you always do what's in the best interest of the Muslim community, right? In these different situations. So it's not these specific commands for these different situations that is the rule. The underlying rule for all of this is you do what is in the best interest of the Muslim community. And what's in the best interest of the Muslim community now in our world? Well, it would not be waging jihad and killing and so on. It would be something else. And so argue that there's something that's actually better, that's in the best interest of the Muslim community now. And
there's a name for that. There's a sheikh by the name of Mufti Abu Layth, and he calls this trajectory hermeneutics. So like what you just said, like,
oh wow,
the goal,
I thought I invented that. That's awesome. That's awesome if someone else came up with it.
Like the goal, like for example, they use like the example of like how is Muhammad like tried to. I don't buy it. Again, I'm like you. I don't buy that Muhammad wanted to ban slavery, because he could have. Yeah. It was simple enough for someone with unlimited power like him. He banned interest, riba. So why couldn't he ban slavery? He could have. I don't think he wanted to, but they claim that, it's along the lines of he made it harder to get slaves. You can only capture slaves from war. You can't kidnap them. You have to you should free slaves. You get lots of reward.
Yeah, it's a good deed.
So it's a good deed. So if you go along this line, now slavery is forbidden. Of course, the Islamists will say, it doesn't say it's forbidden. Slavery is still allowed. And obviously ISIS and these extremists will continue making slaves of people. But the ones that have like good intentions are using this trajectory hermeneutics kind of idea. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. One more question, because this was a good one to close out with, from Luigi 2K. He says, from here in the U.S., cultural conditions in the U.K. appear. So he's talking about being in the U.S., looking over at the U.K. From here in the U.S., cultural conditions in the U.K. appear so dire that it appears only the goodwill of apostate Muslims will keep that country from becoming another Sharia-compliant republic. Is this true? So I think he's basically saying, are the Muslims who are leaving Islam, becoming apostates, are they basically what's going to stand in the way of Islam expanding so much that, things start becoming more and more Sharia compliant?
Yeah.
In other words, because you could apply this elsewhere. In other words, are you and your fellow, that's why I said this is a good one to sort of close out with, are you and your fellow ex-Muslims actually the solution that people are looking for to these hopeless situations, right? Because looking over here, looking at Europe and situations in Europe, lots of people are looking at that going, this is just hopeless. This is just a big mess. Look what's happening over there. It's horrible. And so basically, are you and your ex-Muslims basically the solution?
The solution. Yeah, it's a good question. I can't speak for UK in general. I have seen a lot and heard a lot of worrying concerns. In general, like the world demographics issue is going to be a problem in general because Muslims tend to have a lot of babies. I have 5 kids. You also have 5 kids. But in general, Muslims tend to have an above average size family. And
it's good you were a Muslim first, because if you've been an atheist, you would have had 0 or 1. That's what. If you've been an atheist first, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm evening it out now. But it is concerning, like in general. Like I don't know about UK, but I have heard some concerning things. But speaking in general, I think that helping people to leave Islam, and it's not just ex-Muslims, like you're doing a good job too. You're doing a great job. like people that are able to speak and challenge and have dialogue peacefully and discuss with others and to bring this conversation forward, to talk about different topics like human rights and, freedom of religion or freedom from religion and, all of these things, right? Even you'd be interested in talking about salvation as well. On top of all these things, I think having these conversations is something so useful because people are able to then see through Islam. Ex-Muslims are doing a part. We're not the only part. Like I said, you're also doing a part. And I actually started this whole journey from a guy that was neither Muslim nor ex-Muslim. He was looking into Islam, and then he opened up my mind into looking into these things. And I had like some of my coworkers as well that they were atheists, but they were challenging me on some of the things I was telling them, and it helped me to look into it more. So keep having conversations with Muslims, make them your friends, befriend them, just like you did with Nabil, or Nabil did with you. I don't know how that started, but basically, let's keep doing this. Let's keep having these conversations. I think the pen is mightier than the sword, and if we keep doing this, I think we will make a difference in the world today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, I believe that ex-Muslims are a huge, massive part of the solution, and that's why I'm you, the apostate prophet, the other ex-Muslims. There are ex-Muslim Christians, there are ex-Muslim atheists, there are ex-Muslim agnostics. But everyone out there, regardless of where you agree or disagree, understand that these guys are very important part of what's going to be going on. So be sure that you, if you're not subscribed to Abdullah Samir's YouTube channel, that information's in the description box. You can also follow him on Twitter. I've got a link to his website there, and again, a link to his Patreon campaign.
Thank you so much.
So be sure to grab all that. Oh, one more comment, just because, this one's for me. Ahmed said, I had a dream last night of David Wood becoming Muslim and going to the mosque with my brother.
Oh my God, that's funny.
So Ahmed he's watching so many of my videos that he's dreaming about me. He's dreaming about me converting. Oh,
that's pretty funny.
But yeah, well, Ahmed, keep dreaming, buddy. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks to Abdullah Samir for being on here. And we'll see you again next time. And I'll be on your channel here pretty soon, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's going to be the next conversation. We'll discuss the date soon, and let's do that. I'm excited.
Yeah, so everyone go ahead and subscribe to his channel so you get and click the bell so you get the notification when we're going to be on. And if you weren't subscribed already, tons of videos, so check those out. All right, catch everyone later.
Thank you so much.